I had this picture in my mind's eye of the place that she was living. I'd never been to Half Moon Bay, I'd never been to that part of the Californian coast at all. And as I was driving up there, I found Half Moon Bay, and I thought, yeah, this is just the kind of place I'd pictured, you know, long sweep of sand, and a place where she can run on the beach with this dog that she's going to have a dog, yeah, 'cause she's going to run on the beach with the dog, and it's going to be like one of those natural wood frame houses looking out across the ocean, and there it was. Yeah, I nearly knocked on the door to say, like, you know, hi, Lindsay, I'm here.
But you're so wonderfully kind, even to your characters. I mean, you're going to send her into exile, but you wanted her to be...
I wanted to be somewhere nice where she could have a dog, you know, and she could have a nice life, and it would be warm and sunny, you know, a lot of the time.
And did you abandon her forever in California?
Well, that was the trouble, you see, because having sent her to live in California, I thought, if I send her to live in California, I won't be tempted to write about her again, because I don't understand American culture in the sort of visceral way that an American does, and I could only ever write about America as an outsider looking in. And I didn't really want to set a book in America because I thought I'll just spend all my time convinced I've made so many mistakes, and all the readers will sort of deluge me with rude mail saying, didn't you know this, didn't you know that?
Right.
And I thought, I don't want to take on that challenge, thank you. So the trouble was that once I'd sent her off to live in America, the next thing that came into my head was a great story for Lindsay Gordon. Yeah, I had this brilliant idea for a book set at a trade union conference, and who else could possibly cover this but Lindsay Gordon, you know, who was tailor-made for the job, and I'd already established that she had a history of involvement in union activity. So she was the obvious choice for the job. So I had to drag her back across the ocean on the pretext that she was, because she was now working teaching journalism, she had to publish or perish, and so she had to do a PhD. So she was coming back to England to do some research for her PhD. I mean, the ridiculous lengths we go to try and make what we're doing seem somehow credible or somehow realistic. So Lindsay sort of had to come back, dragged kicking and screaming across the ocean. And then she had to come back again for the 5th Lindsay Gordon book, Booked for Murder. Because
that one, right there.
That's the one, yeah.
Yes.
And she had to come back to England that time because a friend of hers an American friend of hers had been murdered in London, and another friend was the prime suspect for the killing. And, you know, with one mighty bound, Lindsay has to leap across the Atlantic and find herself yet once again embroiled in murder.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're almost like an Arthur Conan Doyle, you know, forever trying to keep Holmes down there in the Reichenbach Falls, and he just keeps popping back. Yeah,
maybe I should introduce Lindsay Gordon to Laurie King. You know, Mary Russell and Lindsay could run away together or something, and leave Holmes sort of standing there going, what?
That's a lovely idea. While you were in America, you did some research for a book which I'm extremely fond of, and in fact, I'll preface that by saying that you, after abandoning Lindsay in Half Moon Bay, even with the dog, decided or came to write a private investigator series about Manchester's Kate Brannigan. But you became really something of an authority on the private investigator novel, or at least what we now call the woman sleuth private investigator novel. Although I've read your paper on hard-boiled detectives and know that you have precise and decided views on Hammett and Chandler and so forth. Anyway, while you were in America, you researched a suitable job for a woman, which is...
It's a book about real women private eyes in America and the UK. I spent about 6 months going around interviewing women who did the job. I'd done a couple of Kate Brannigan books by this stage, and I was at a publisher party in London, and as one does when one has had rather too many glasses of publisher's free wine, and an editor says to you, are there lots of these women out there really? I mean, you're just making all this up, aren't you? And I said, no, there's lots of women private eyes out there. Place is absolutely thronged with them. And she said, oh, well, why don't you go and do a book about them? That'd make a good book. And, you know, you wake up in the morning after and you think, did I really agree to write a non-fiction book? And it appeared that I had. And at that point, I only actually knew one woman private eye in Liverpool in England. And I thought, oh no, what have I done? So I had to do some fairly desperate research, and I must say that some of my fellow crime writers were extremely helpful and generous with their contacts and indeed their accommodation, Sarah Paretsky and Sue Grafton in particular. And I amassed these contacts, and it was the other fun thing about it was a lot of these women, real women private eyes, know each other. So sometimes I was being passed from hand to hand like a parcel. And at the end of it, I guess I interviewed nearly 40 of them.
On both sides of the Atlantic,
On both sides
right?
of the Atlantic. And it was absolutely fascinating. The stories these women came up with are just amazing. I mean, I could sit here for the next 5 hours and tell you stories from the book that would just, you'd go, what? Oh, that's amazing. I don't believe it.
One of the things I thought was so interesting was you pointed out that Britain does not require private investigators to be licensed, that any old person can hang up a shingle in the UK and set themselves out as a private investigator.
I could do it. You could do it. Someone who's come out of prison yesterday for murder could do it.
It's kind of like our bounty hunters, which we've been made rather rudely aware of here in Arizona. Recently, don't have to have any particular professional qualifications or, God knows, operate under any professional restraints. But you did mention, which I also think is interesting, that in Britain, I guess almost any individual can't bear arms. So that if these people are out there operating, they're also doing so without weapons.
That's right.
Other than whatever cunning and presumably martial arts skills or something that they have. Does that make a difference when you talk to them between the attitude that a British and an American, particularly I'm thinking of a woman who is a little sometimes less able to deal with direct violence?
I think that the other side of what you're saying there is that the chances of you coming face to face with someone who is also carrying a gun are very low.
True.
In the United Kingdom.
And that's true for British police as well.
Yeah, British police are only armed in certain particular circumstances and in certain particular places. But I think that what they all spoke of was the way that they had very consciously over the years developed sort of skills to defuse confrontations and methods to defuse confrontations. There's a wonderful woman called Yvonne Twybe who works in Birmingham in the UK, and she's tiny. She can't be much more than like 5'1", 5'2", and she's this little bird of a woman. And she says, I just shout at them as if they're my kids.
What a great idea.
She just treats these great hulking men who are she's serving injunctions on for beating their wives, as if she was like speaking to her 16-year-old son. She said, I just looked them straight in the eye. They said, they've all got mothers.
I think that's wonderful. And indeed, I was fascinated reading the book to see these contrasts, but I also couldn't help but think that doing this work must have made a difference in your own writing about Kate.
Yeah, I mean, not least it gave me an awful lot of stories that just locked away for future reference. Because, I mean, so many hours of interviews, there's so much stuff I had to leave out. So I have lots of great stories that one way or another have filtered their way into books and will continue to do so. I think it probably made me more aware of the practical risks, if you like, on the street. And also sort of like the different ways that women have of dealing with situations than men tend to use. Going back slightly to what you were saying about the guns, I just remembered a wonderful line from PI down in Florida, a woman called Jean Mignolet, who is just fabulous, a great character. And she had been an undercover cop with the Bureau of Firearms, Alcohol and Tobacco. Is that the right one?
Something like that. It's part of the Treasury Department.
Like
right.
And she'd been an undercover cop with them, and she said, they were busy teaching me how to shoot, and I said, never mind teaching me how to shoot, teach me how to run in high heels.
I live in Manchester, England, sort of in the heartland, and Kate is, I find it interesting that there is, we've had a tremendous regional growth in crime fiction in the States, which is, people coming to be identified so closely with their setting. V.I. Warshawski in Chicago, Kinsey Millhound, two people you've mentioned, with a coastal town in California. And certainly Kate is rooted in Manchester. And in fact, when I've been there to visit Manchester with you, you've given me the Kate Brannigan tour. Look, this is where her office is, this is where she met Richard, and, this is the place she drinks the coffee and the whole bit. Has it made you very visible in Manchester? Do they see you as a local resource and treasure?
I don't know if I'd put it that highly.
Local resource, snip off the treasure to answer the question.
I think the diary desk of the Manchester Evening News sees me as a great source of off-the-wall stories. I get a lot of support from the local local bookshop. We're very big Waterstones, so we have a very powerful and active crime writing program. And I get a lot of support from the local libraries and from the local media.